Hi, I'm Madeline James, and today we are world building. I am working on the temperature, precipitation, aridity, and climate maps for the world I'm building for my world building guide. So I thought I'd kind of show you what I'm doing. It's going to be part, maybe not quite guide, but part world building vlog, part show and tell, and some probably sped up footage of me actually drawing the maps. Fantasy isn't about creating a not Earth with some magic thrown in. It's about creating a whole new world that you can explore, feel a new way of life. It's about that sense of wonder, that sense of amazement, that sense of escapism almost, being able to go somewhere else. And this is especially important for me. There are other, values to fantasy, like exploring real world problems and getting to improve the stakes or up the stakes for, epic plot lines and stuff like that. But for me, it's about this feeling of other, of being somewhere else, of being somewhere new, of feeling immersed and like you could really imagine being in this place. And so for me, creating a new story starts with the world building. I like to kind of create this setting, this world from, plate tectonics up to the mountains, up to the trees, up to the, I start there. For me, that inspires everything that comes after. The world inspires the type of people that would live there, the type of cultures that would have grown in that sort of environment. And that just, I don't know why, but for me, that is such an inspiring part of the process. So as you're about to become abundantly aware, if you are not, already someone that follows, me on some other social media or on my blog or something, I get into it. I break down the science. If I can't tell you the exact number of inches of rainfall in a specific part of my map in a particular season, I'm not done world building yet. So, you've been warned. I was a geology major in college for a while, and I just love the science behind it. And there are so many sciences. For someone who's obviously not actually researching or studying academically any of those fields, I can really only touch the surface. But I love learning as much as I can and incorporating that into my process. I've improved on this process as I go. Every time I build a new world, my process becomes a little bit more defined, a little bit more structured. I pull a little bit more science, a little more psychology into it. So it really is an evolving process for me. When I started working on my most recent writing project that I was planning in, what month is it? Back in September? August? Somewhere around then. I started planning a new writing project, a new world, and I figured if I'm going to be going back through all my notes again, I have a blog now, I might as well start putting it into blog posts, and I think I imagined it being a much shorter thing than it is turning out to be, but that's fine. I figured that other crazy people like me, or people who just find this part of the process interesting, could read my process and follow it or build on it for themselves. So before we start drawing new maps, we need to kind of go through all the ones that I've already made for my world building guide, and normally we wouldn't have to do this if I was showing you kind of a different part of my process, but these ones that I'm building, the temperature, precipitation, aridity, climate, those take into account all the ones that have come before. So I figured it would help if I kind of at least give you a little walkthrough of what I'm going to be working with, because you'll kind of see them splayed all over my desk and flipping through randomly all the different maps, and it's probably a little overwhelming, so let's flip through those real quick before we get started. So I keep all of my worlds in little folder binder things like this. I just find it an easier way to keep track of all of my maps and kind of flip through them and keep them in good shape. All of my covers are horrendous like this. You'd think they'd be cool maps, they're not. So if we flip to the back, the first map I create is my plate tectonic map. So you can sort of see I figured out the different types of plate boundaries, some of my hot spots, because those will be volcanoes later. And that kind of gives me an initial look at the lay of the land for my world. And then I kind of go through and I just figure out my landforms, so you can kind of see I have these equatorial continents here, one stretching down here, one stretching up there. So then I kind of go through and I assign initial physiographic regions, and these don't end up staying completely accurate, but they give me a little bit more of an idea of the topography. So, you know, you have coastal plains, you have hilllands, you have ice sheets, plateaus, fjords, mountains, valleys, that sort of a thing. And this just helps for the next step, which is elevation. And I don't go super detailed in my elevation at this stage because it's, you know, global. I really don't care if it's not going to help me make maps later on. When I get to my regional maps, I will go a lot more granular with my elevation because then it actually matters, like exactly where those rivers are going to flow and stuff. But at this level, I really just care if the elevation is going to affect things like temperature and precipitation and wind currents and stuff like that. Alright, so then I go through and I do air circulation, and most of these maps going forward will show the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere, and then the reverse, as you can see there. But I just sort of have the main wind belts mapped based off how they would pull due to where my land masses are, and then just your main winds and just like some little reminder notes for me of, you know, what those different belts are. So you have your equatorial, International Tropical Convergence Zone wind belt, which is hot and wet. At your horse latitudes, this is going to be warmer and drier, and then at your subpolar wind belts, you kind of get more cool and moist. And you can see between these two, they're slightly different, and this is mostly due to the pull of where the warmest part on the surface is, or, you know, where the warmest part on the planet is, excuse me. Due to the tilt and which part of the planet is closest to the sun. So then I kind of map out my pressure zones, and these are just like major areas, and these will kind of change seasonally more so than this, but this is just sort of your main sort of permanent pressure zones based off the seasons. You'll see I've got a lot of high pressure going on up here in winter. And over here, you see that a little bit more down here. You see this belt almost of low pressure down here in both seasons. So then I go through and I specifically map out wind currents. And these are important for determining offshore and onshore winds, which are very important in temperature and precipitation. And this mostly takes into effect high and low pressure areas, and then those major wind belts and what direction those cells are sort of moving in general. So this just gives me a sort of an idea, and then I color code it for nice easy reference, what's offshore, what's an onshore wind. And then I do ocean circulation maps, and these are a lot cooler than you'd think. I don't get super deep into them. There's like a whole like lower level deep ocean circulation, and that's a bit too much. I mean, I'm sure it would affect this a little bit, and maybe one day I'll get into that, but like this is all very clearly pretty impactful. You know, you see you have colder shores where water is coming in from colder areas, warmer shores where it's coming in from warmer areas. And the cool thing here is you get upwelling. So these are major areas of upwelling, and this is going to be where a lot of the fishing is going to be. There's going to be really, really rich marine life in these areas. So you would really likely see large fishing civilizations coming up in these sorts of areas. Fun fact. And you can see that in this season. You see these over here. So I think it's this area here. Right, sees upwelling up here in summer, and then in winter it's a little bit more south, but it's still around that same area. You really would probably see a very dominant fishing civilization in that area because they would have really, really good access to fish during those times of year. If you want to understand more deeply what I'm working on, I will link these parts of my world building guide below. But so for my precipitation maps, the rough process here is to apply a base layer of precipitation everywhere where there isn't, something that would specifically lead to low or non-existent precipitation levels. So this is stuff like rain shadows, offshore winds, looking at certain types of pressure zones and all that kind of stuff. I'm marking these areas in pencil and then coloring the rest in my baseline color. And then for all the different factors that increase precipitation, I'm going to move that color up a level. So I always make sure these colors are kind of a gradient so I can layer them. And if I have to go back at the end and kind of redo the colors to make them stand out a little more, I do that so it's easy to reference.
When we wake, hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun. We know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright. Oh, you and I, we got it. We don't need no can weather any storm. Before I sleep, hear the crickets, see the moon. Side by side and through. No limit to what we can do. Oh, we know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright. Oh, you and I, we got it. Oh, we don't need no more. You and I can weather any storm. Ooh, ooh. Oh, you and I, we got it. Oh, we don't need no more.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic lights. And I really wanna know, if I will ever figure out where the road goes. Even if I'm falling down, I will keep on searching for my highs. You can say I lost my mind, I will keep on holding my head high. Even if the sky is falling down. Jumping from cliffs so high, trusting our wings to fly. Sometimes we're crashing down, but we get up and start from the ground. And I really wanna know, if I will ever figure out Even if I'm falling down, I will keep on searching for my highs. You can say I lost my mind, I will keep on holding my head high. Even if the sky is falling down, even if the sky is falling down, yeah. The sky is falling down.
At this point, I would probably say that my temperature maps are the most complicated. You could be a sane, normal person and do what, some other world builders do online, and use like Photoshop and layers to do this, but there's something about doing it on paper for me. I don't know. We've established I'm weird. But I use pencil to make temperature bands around the planet, and I take into account the proximity to the sun, seasonal tilt, all that. And then for each effect for temperature, I'm adjusting those bands to make them hotter, colder, milder, more extreme, etc. I don't know why, but doing this is so satisfying for me. And then once I'm done, I can color in the bands. So it kind of looks like a whole lot of scribbles until I'm done with this, but it's really cool when it's finished.
Was in the crowd, but I felt so alone. Looked at my phone like every other second. My future was blurry and numb, a tunnel where there's no light. Oh, but then you came and sat right next to me. Your eyes, they glowed and filled me up. We had never met before that time, but I just knew that we'd end up. You took it, you took it, took away my loneliness. Oh, I know it, I know it. You're making me wholehearted. Together, together is always better. I don't want to be parted. You're making me wholehearted. You're making me wholehearted. We jumped off the subway leading nowhere. Your warm hands rubbed off the cold around me. I heard you say that everything is alright, but how did you know how I felt? You saw right through me that day. I was lost in space, but you pulled me down and wiped away those cloudy thoughts. I could see the sky when you were close to me. I can't believe what you brought. You took it, you took it, took away my loneliness. Oh, I know it, I know it. You're making me wholehearted. Together, together is always better. I don't want to be parted. You're making me wholehearted. You're making me wholehearted. I will always remember it. How you turned everything around. I will always remember it. How you got me off the back.